Audio-visual abstract. Hi, my name is Hallie Liberto. This is my first audio-visual abstract. The idea is that I'm going to take about 5 minutes to talk to you about one of my papers, in this case the exploitation solution to the non-identity problem, which appeared in 2014 in Philosophical Studies. The audiovisual abstract will not be like a presentation. You won't get enough information from this to appropriately cite my work or anything like that. You'll have to read the paper, but this should give you a taste of whether or not you want to read the paper. All right, so basically, in the exploitation solution to the non-identity problem, I try to resolve the popular problem of non-identity that Derek Parfit presented in Reasons and Persons by looking at popular accounts of wrongful exploitation and seeing if we can use that as a solution. All right, I'm not going to explain the non-identity problem here. I assume that if you're interested in the paper, you're familiar with the problem. All right, but I do want to point out that there are a few similarities between the non-identity problem and this concern that a lot of us have about what is wrong about cases of exploitation in which it seems as though there's a mutual benefit, that both the exploiter and the exploitee are better off than they would have been with no transaction. All right. One similarity between the two problems, of course, is that the victims are opting in to their own victimization, or there's this thought that they would opt in to their own victimization in non-identity problem cases, because we're talking about future generations typically. Usually what we think is that, for instance, the reason why it's hard to say that their rights are being violated by our bad environmental policies or by our crazy bioethical choices that leave them with injuries or genetic disabilities. All right, the reason why they can't really complain, the reason why they haven't been harmed is because they wouldn't exist otherwise. And given that they wouldn't have existed if we hadn't made the choice that we made, then even if our choice was in some way infringing upon their right, maybe their right to the fair share of the world's resources or their right to a particularly good start in life, it seems as though they would probably retroactively waive that right. Similarly, in exploitation cases, it seems as though most people, if they have a right to a fair wage, might well waive that right in order to work at all. All right. So as you can see, in both cases, we have trouble saying that these people are harmed, and we have trouble saying that their rights have been violated. All right. Wrongful exploitation theories usually turn to something like unfairness, all right, or taking advantage of somebody else's vulnerability in an excessive way. These sorts of theories usually stipulate what I call a gain clause and a vulnerability clause. The gain clause is some wrong attached to what they're profiting with, whether it is money or some service. And the vulnerability clause is the conditions that they have to meet in order for it to be correct to say that they've been wrongly exploited, as opposed to just having been lazy and not looked around to see what the other options are. All right, so it seems as though in non-identity problem cases, the people living in the future generations are made vulnerable to present people in a way that I think that exploitation theories' accounts of vulnerability can cover, and I make a case for that in the paper. And then I suggest that the gain clause is actually not very strict, that given that almost every account of wrongful exploitation wants to be able to take into account merely perceived benefits on the part of the exploiter, perhaps gains reaped for somebody else's behalf, or maybe objectives being sought that are not really gains but still matter to the exploiter, or perhaps ex-ante gains, such as a bunch of valuable lottery tickets, even if they don't turn out to contain the winning lottery ticket. All right, that might be a gain that an exploiter achieves through an act of exploitation. And it seems to me that these various things are not all gains in the sense of benefit, and so it seems like the gain clause might be able to cover the sorts of objectives that exploiters might have, or that currently living people might have, when they make the sort of choices described in non-identity cases. Now, there are plenty of objections to this view. I won't go through them here, but if you have an objection, you should read the paper because I probably address it. All right, thank you.